All right, it looks like we are live. Wait just a moment here for people to join us. Get on fully live. So we've got a few people waiting for you. If you are joining us, welcome. Join us. 1 minute here. My name is Darren Milligan. I'm joined here with my colleague Ashley Naranjo. We are here in Washington, D.C. We're not in our normal spots, not in our offices at the Smithsonian. We're both at home today, like many of you, I imagine. But we're glad to be here to hopefully answer some questions and get some people pointed in the right direction. So welcome to our, used to be weekly, but now it's 2 or 3 times weekly office hours. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, about our schedule moving forward and how we have some new resources available to support caregivers and teachers and students out there as they sort of navigate some of the new realities that we're all adjusting to now. So I think I'll walk through just a couple slides as a way of introduction, and then I think we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like you can see over, hopefully to the right of your screen there, there's just a little message there from Smithsonian Education. That's where you can get your questions to us. I'm going to switch us over here so you can see the screen. There we go. So again, my name is Darren Milligan here at the Center for Learning and Digital Access at the Smithsonian in Washington, and that's Ashley.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and looking forward to sharing some distance learning opportunities with you, both from the Smithsonian Learning Lab as well as from across the Smithsonian. There are currently hundreds of museum educators that are working on making sure that you have the resources you need to continue learning and teaching your students. So please do let us know what you need in the chat box, and we're happy to support you.
Great, thank you. So glad we can both be here to support things. So if this is your first time, typically we're here during this time slot on Tuesdays from 4 to 5 Eastern. We have added some additional hours, and we can talk about the schedule later on. Our next office hours will actually be this Thursday at the same time slot between 4 and 5. You can always see a listing of all the events going on there at the Learning Lab About page, which is /about/events. And if you're new to this, we probably have some new folks this week joining us. The way that you get your questions into us is by using the chat box just to the right of the video if you're watching this hopefully on YouTube. Occasionally the chat box is just below the screen where you see Ashley and I, depending on how you've got your screen set up there on YouTube, but that's how you can get your questions into us. We're going to talk through some new resources that we have available for distance learning, for teachers, but also really for parents, and some self-motivated or self-directed learning pieces for tweens and teens. Pop that up there and come back over here to see if we've got, actually, I don't know if you want to do an introduction to the distance learning pieces now, or if we want to just wait for some questions to come in.
Sure. So I just wanted to mention when we do receive questions, basically we'll answer them in a queue. So once you type in your question in the chat box, typically it's on the right-hand side of your screen, we'll basically kind of post up the question here just like this. And that will be how you know that we're answering that specific question. I would say we can get started with the new distance learning page. So the way that you can access this page is learninglab.si.edu/distance learning. And I'm going to go ahead and put that link for everyone in the chat so that they have access to it. If you want to open a new browser and follow along, or you want to follow along on a different device, please feel free to do so. Like I said, it's learninglab.si.edu/distance learning. And so you can see that there up on the screen. And why don't I just give a quick tour of the distance learning page, and then if folks have questions, we can kind of go from there. Sound good, Darren?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. So up on the distance learning page, you will see a few things. The first thing that you'll see is kind of an invitation to reach out to us. Like I said, there are literally hundreds of museum educators that are ready and willing to support you with online resources that are free and available from across history, culture, science, and the visual arts. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that. You can do so by emailing learning@si.edu, and we'll make sure that it gets to the right museum educator who can give you as much feedback as possible and kind of point you in the right direction of specific resources that you might be looking for. The second thing I wanted to point out was the Smithsonian Learning Lab. For those of you that are not familiar with it, it's an online digital platform that basically hosts all of the digital content of the Smithsonian for educators in one place. So there's a search box there that says search for Learning Lab collections. So you can type in a topic or a theme. So for example, if you're teaching about habitats or pollination, you could type in that search term and then you'll see specific resources that are relevant, as well as specific collections. And when we say collections, we mean kind of thematic groupings of resources. So they can include things like portraits, for example. They include things like videos, websites. You can see kind of the breadth of the example. Lots of experts talking about habitats as an example. So that's just kind of one piece of that, as well as to be able to search through the repository of resources. And again, this is from across the Smithsonian, and it's from across subject areas as well as grade levels. So if we go back to the distance learning page, there's that search bar that I mentioned up in the middle. For the latest information about Smithsonian museums and the physical spaces, you can click on the box there, and that'll give you our latest updates as far as visiting the physical spaces. But for now, lots of online resources to keep you engaged, to keep you and your little ones engaged. I also wanted to mention there is a PDF guide to getting started in the Learning Lab. We've seen some really great, amazing collections from teachers who have said, hey folks, for today, students, we're gonna, look at clouds, and they've put together a quick collection of cloud artworks, and then encourage students to go outside and take a peek at some of the clouds that are outside, maybe do their own cloud sketches. So that's just one example of a way that a teacher curated a collection. And so I just wanted to make sure that you are aware that there is a PDF guide available to getting started if you want to curate your own collections. There are ways to both adapt existing collections as well as start from scratch and create something uniquely your own. And so Darren's just kind of scrolling through so you can see it's very easy to follow. There's lots of screenshots, and it kind of breaks it out into a step-by-step process for you too. So you can see there's the ability to add some interactivity to quiz questions, to be able to add additional information or even pinpoint specific details on an image. So for example, if you wanted to look at an artwork or a photograph and point out detail for your students, you can do that on the Learning Lab. All right. So the other thing I wanted to mention is there's also a brief video that goes through that guide too. So if it's basically a recording of a video. So you can see I've recorded just about less than a half an hour, a short video of the Learning Lab and how to get started there. So that's also a resource for you. Thus far in our efforts to support teachers, caregivers, and learners who are now facing online learning as their kind of new approach to the ways that they're doing teaching and learning, I wanted to point out that DCPS, the Washington District of Columbia Public Schools, had reached out to us with their curriculum pacing guides. And so thus far we have aligned kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and seventh grade, eighth grade. So K through 8 resources. You can see an example of what that looks like. Basically, based on the pacing guides, there are Smithsonian resources as well as URLs included for each of those pacing guides. So you can take a look at that. All of those links are now clickable, and these are being updated constantly. So every day at 4 o'clock, we update a new version so that you have the latest information from all of the hundreds of educators that are working on this project together at the Smithsonian. This is an example of what a collection might look like. They're highly visual. This is one from our Talk With Me toolkit. So it really pairs what caregivers can do with young children and kind of gives some really interesting discussion prompts and uses visuals in a way to kind of pair inquiry with artworks too. So lots of beautiful examples, things to keep kids engaged, keep them in conversation with you as parents and caregivers. So feel free to take a look at all of those. Lots of great resources. There's interactives. There's an oral history guide from our Folk Life Center that I think would be a great time to call up some grandparents and see, if they have any good stories that you could start to kind of offer as a learning experience. So all of the DCPS curriculum pacing guides are available right there on the page. I also wanted to mention that we've also highlighted caregivers and families as a specific audience. So if you fall into that category, perhaps you're a teacher and a caregiver, so you're kind of doing some double duty. In the caregivers page, there are specific games and activities that are also age-based as well. They require limited facilitation and could be really great opportunities for engagement. As we think about some of these resources too, I wanted to mention that they are kind of a variety of resources in terms of technology. So for example, there are some that are really kind of no technology required. There are some that are low tech, so maybe it's a printable activity sheet. And then there are some that are kind of interactives where it's a game that you play on a device. So all of those are available on that distance learning page as you access that there. And then again, there are also some self-directed learning resources too. So I know a lot of tweens and teens are looking for ways to stay engaged. And so this is also a guide to those resources as well. And they also include things like games and activities, but these are for some of the middle to high school age group. So you can take a look at those as well. I wanted to mention too, obviously we have online office hours. The schedule is posted right there. So Thursday, March 17th, that's where you are today. We have Tuesday. Oh, the week has gone by too quickly, huh? So Thursday, March 19th is our next office hours. If you want to tell a friend about office hours, please do. They're always free. You can drop in at any time and ask your questions. And we have a continuously updated schedule. So we'll continue to add more of these online office hours throughout the coming weeks. I know teachers are starting to kind of prepare for their students, and also caregivers are looking for some resources as well. There are also other opportunities from across the Smithsonian, so you can access all of those here on this page, and more are coming to become available in the coming days too. So be sure to kind of bookmark this page or keep it open on your tabs so that as you see more resources, you can continue to refresh and look for those resources. Darren, did you have anything to add? Yeah.
No, just to jump in to say too, is actually talking about bookmarking. We've got a big banner up on the homepage now. So right below the here, you can get back to that page. So if you just remember to go to Learning Lab, you can jump right from the homepage into that page and check out this. And just to emphasize what Ashley was saying, yeah, we're updating this several times a day as the museums and the educators across the Smithsonian sort of adjust to not having a museum space to be able to do their programming in, but really shift to providing resources and training and support to all these audiences as they go about some new learning approaches. So make sure to just keep checking back, because I think this page will expand quite a bit over the coming days and really the coming weeks as we continue to listen to what educators out there are telling us that they need and responding and making those resources available.
I also wanted to take this time to invite folks to use the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. So I know folks are kind of coming in and out. So feel free to do any of the following. Introduce yourself. Let us know what you're looking for. Let us know what age groups or subject areas you teach. And that'll help us direct the kind of remainder of the hour. We have about 45 minutes left. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. We want to make sure that this hour is as useful as possible to you. So please feel free to ask a question in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. Like I said, we'll basically go in order as far as the queue goes. So if you have a question, the easy way to do that is to use the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. And it can be anything, really. It can be, how do I teach with museum resources, to, something more specific.
Mhm.
All right, so we have a few questions here, and you want to take the first one at least?
Yeah, sure. We've seen an uptick in queries for the Learning Lab in conjunction with open access. We have. We sort of jumped from one big thing at the Smithsonian into another in terms of our online resources. Last month, the Smithsonian had a big announcement that we dedicated several million images, as well, both 2D and 3D images, as well as a lot of data into the public domain, which is a kind of a big deal for us as a big giant institution that takes a long time to kind of make things move, but really an exciting moment for scientists and researchers and educators and students as they begin to have more clarity about how they can take and reuse the kind of materials that we have. So we've definitely seen an uptake in that. We're really, the whole current situation really sort of came at the tails of that, right at the moment where I think we were going to begin to see how teachers and their students began to engage with that. I can show you, for anybody who's new to the kind of open access piece. I'm going to come back over here to the distance learning page we were just looking at. Over in the left-hand side, we've got a link here to open access at the Smithsonian. So if open access is a new concept to those of you who are listening, you can check this page out. And this really explains a lot of information about what the Smithsonian did for open access. There's a great little intro video, and then some FAQs that Ashley and I and some others at Smithsonian Education developed to better help classrooms, both teachers and students, better understand sort of what that means. So hopefully that's a great resource. We were sort of, I think, sidelined a little bit on kind of what will be the next steps with that, but I think it's going to hopefully help more teachers and students understand how best to use Smithsonian resources.
Yeah, Darren, I was thinking too, we could also show folks what it looks like when a resource is open access. So now there are really some great features that when you click on a resource, you'll see the resource image, and then there's the ability to zoom in and out. So here, Darren's doing a search for Abraham Lincoln, let's say. And now when you click on a resource that's open access, we'll just choose any of them, maybe the craft plate portrait, one of my favorite portraits from the National Portrait Gallery. You can see on the left side, of course, there's kind of that menu. We might have to remove the banner at the bottom just so everybody can see it, Darren, if you want to, the blue banner.
Oh, I got the blue
there
banner.
we go. There we go. You got it. So we can zoom in and out, and then we can also download the image. And then you see that 0 button right there on the right-hand side. That gives you additional information that this is a CC0 image that you can use. You, students, anyone can use. They can do things like remix it into a collage or create, I don't know, a fundraiser. Maybe they put the craft plate portrait on, a t-shirt or a canvas bag or something like that. So it's a much more freer use of what you're able to do with this image. So just an example of one image, but certainly on the Learning Lab, you'll notice that there are new features as far as buttons. And then you can download this image in a variety of file types too, which I think is really important. So you can see that there's kind of your choice of how you want to download it, the kind of resolution of the image that you download, that sort of thing. So hoping that's helpful to folks. But if you have additional questions about open access, I think the learninglab.si.edu/open access page is a great place to start. There's FAQs there that we've created for users and specifically thinking about educators and students in mind. So great question, Hollis. Looks like you have another question, Hollis, too. You mentioned you're teleworking from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So welcome. We're so glad to hear that you're joining us, even remotely. And you're just catching up on tutorials to learn how to use the Learning Lab. Well, I would say that the guide, the PDF guide that we mentioned earlier in the hour, is a great place to start. That's really kind of, there is specifically, there are screenshots, there's kind of step-by-step tutorials. That's a great place to start. The other thing that we have, as you scroll down on the home page, you'll notice that there are some screen tips as well as video kind of just-in-time videos that describe each step in the process of either discovering, creating, or sharing. And Darren's going to kind of point some of those out for us too, so that you can see that.
Yeah, those show up here under these, under tips. And so each one of these in the 3 sections is actually noticed as just a small animation that'll walk you through what we mean by those things and sort of the possibilities of what you can do for those. I won't stream those videos through there. But I'm also along the bottom of the screen, hopefully you can see we've got a short URL, which is s.si.edu/SLL guide, which will get you directly to that PDF. We showed it earlier on the distance learning page, but you can jump right into that too if that's a quicker way to get that to your Hollis if you haven't seen that before.
Excellent. It looks too like V1 McGregor says, great resource in the chat. So we're glad to hear that this is a helpful resource to you as you're thinking about either digital museum resources for your own learning, for your own teaching. There's lots that's been curated thus far, and like we said, it will continue to grow over time. I know a lot of districts are starting to think about what distance learning looks like. A lot of teachers and curriculum developers are looking for high quality, free, and these are just great examples of them. We should mention that collections can be basically curated by museum educators like myself and Darren, but they can also be curated by you. So teachers and students can also take what the Smithsonian has to offer and make sense of it. You can create thematic collections, you can create lesson plans that are really structured, first do this, then do this, or you can create student activities, and that might be a great opportunity here to create some kind of curated collections that are on specific themes that might be of interest to students as they're working kind of remotely for their own learning, to be able to access those and kind of have, whether you have like a choice board or something like that, that might be an option as well. So lots of great resources to access here on the lab.
Yeah, and actually, I just put up a banner on the bottom of the screen there too, just as a reminder. There's quite a few people sort of kind of watching right now, but might not quite have questions ready for us. We're here, for this hour. We've got about a half hour left for our session today. We're going to be here 2 or 3 days a week for the foreseeable future, I think, to make sure that you've got a live time that you can really connect with someone. But if you have an idea or a question that you're still kind of formulating or maybe takes a little bit more explanation, definitely send us an email at learning@si.edu. Those come actually right directly to Ashley and I. And if we can't answer them, we can find someone at one of the museums or research centers or libraries from across the Smithsonian who can definitely find the right resource or the right answer or connect you with the right expert to answer whatever question or inquiry you might have. So I'm going to leave that up there just for a little while, just to remind people that if this isn't the right format for you in terms of getting your questions to us, we're always available at that email address, so you can definitely reach out to us at any time.
Absolutely, and like Darren said, when you email us, basically you have both of our brains to be able to try to kind of help tackle whatever question or specific topic you're looking for. But then we're also supported by hundreds of museum educators from across the Smithsonian, across disciplines, and across grade levels. There are hundreds of museum educators that have been working kind of over the past week to make sure that we have distance learning opportunities, whether they're live virtual opportunities or online resources. Like I said, there are some that are kind of no tech. So for example, conducting an oral history on the phone with a grandparent or an older relative or community member. And there are some that are kind of more low tech. Maybe they're activity sheets or they're a hands-on experiment that's described on a PDF. And then there are some that are high tech too. So of course you have access to things that could be played, on a tablet. So for example, the Smithsonian Science Education Center has some great science interactives that you can access to. So all of these things are included on that distance learning page that Darren has pulled up. I know that it's an overwhelming time to kind of change and shift from kind of the traditional school model to online learning, and especially for those of you that are not, kind of maybe new to this, we're here to help. So please, please, please feel free to reach out. You have a resource in the Smithsonian. As more people are joining too, I wanted to remind you that if you have a question for us during this online office hours, you can see that Hollis and V1 McGregor have made some comments in the chat box. Please feel free to ask us a question. We want to make sure that this hour is as useful to you as possible. So basically on the right-hand side of your screen, depending on what type of device you look at, there is a set of there's a chat box where you can ask questions. So you can see it on the screen right now. Sometimes on devices, it might be below where the video is, where we're talking here. But like I said, happy to help with any questions that you have. We're thrilled to see that folks are really excited about the offerings that the Smithsonian has to offer. So let's see if there's any questions.
Just wanted to come back here. This is, we'll sort of scroll down a little bit on the distance learning page. This is the page we were looking at before that has all the alignments. And this is the section we're going to be adding to quite a bit. So, we're here during office hours now, but there's some other emerging ways to connect coming up this coming week. We've got a Twitter chat on Monday. That's SS Chat if you're a social studies or history teacher, and maybe you're familiar with Twitter chats, or if you're not. It's really just a conversation that happens over Twitter and using that hashtag. And so the focus of this one has shifted a little bit given the current circumstances. We were going to be talking with some folks at the National Museum of American History about some of the new resources they have. We're going to be talking, I think, more generally this week about just about kind of what's available from the Smithsonian, what's available for distance learning. And so if you're a Twitter user or a Twitter follower, like many of us are, you can click just on the SS chat there, and that will take you over to that conversation. So that's going to be this coming Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You scroll down a little bit further on the left here again. We're going to have some more focused subject area office hours. And so these social studies onlines are going to be kind of a combination, I think, right, Ashley, of sort of a little bit of presentation, but also an open session like our office hours here, so that social studies history teachers can connect with the education team at the National Museum of American History, but also from a lot of the other Smithsonian museums who have relevant content will be joining them as that schedule comes out. So the first one's going to be next Thursday. They're going to do 2 sessions at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern. And I think a lot more sessions probably to come as the sort of history and social studies educators and curators and historians from across the Smithsonian join together to provide that resource.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to mention too is in the second column, you can see that there are some science webcasts. And these are brought to you by the National Museum of Natural History, as well as the National Air and Space Museum. As you can see, the next upcoming one isn't until April. However, Smithsonian Science How is a great resource for archived webcasts, so you can always watch those. Those are basically kind of interview style webinars with Smithsonian experts. They're intended for school audiences, and you can see here's the information for the one for April 9th, but as you scroll down, I think there should be maybe, let's see, Darren, if you go up to the top, there's some archived resources as well. And what's nice about these two is in addition to the actual webinar, they've also done some packaging as far as next generation science standards and other online resources that are related. And you can see just some of the screenshots are so great. Their host, Maggie Benson, does a great job of really kind of bringing science alive with some of the scientists that are at the National Museum of Natural History. I should say the same is true for STEM in 30. They are just such an active team and really engaging. And so those are some great video resources that are both archived as well as coming up in the future that you can tune into. Yeah, and then there's this great example too from Air and Space. So as we scroll down, we can kind of see a little bit more about the series. Yeah, that's perfect. Great.
Cool, and maybe some of you out there have had the opportunity to take advantage of the video conferencing that the Smithsonian American Art Museum has done for a long time now. It's a really incredible program with an amazing set of educators at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. They're offering those sort of by request, depending on, I think we're all kind of figuring out what our new realities are, but you can click into there and come over to their site and connect with them to see what programs are available and information on how you can request one for you and your students, no matter where they might be. So this is another great resource looking at American art, I think, through the lens of art, but also through the lens of art history and through the lens of American history and culture. And so it's a great way to use artwork to do a lot of really interesting things for you and your students.
Absolutely.
Back up to the top here. And just as a reminder, in case we do have some new people coming in, we can't see you or hear you in the way that you can see or hear us, unfortunately. But you can get your questions into us. Hopefully you see over to the right-hand side of your screen on YouTube, there should be a chat area. You'll see some comments there from Smithsonian Education and Hollis Gentry and V1 McGregor. That's how you can get your questions into us. And so, if there's someone at my door, these are the joys of working from home. Their mail coming. That's how you can get your questions into us. So you can type your questions in and we'll take those as they come in, and Ashley and I will find the right resources for you and try to find a question for you. So feel free to put your question in there anytime.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if there are no questions, I wonder if we do just kind of a quick homepage tour too, to let people know. Oh, here we go. There is a question. Oh, maybe, sometimes comments that come in kind of out of context. I'm wondering if, Thomas, did you type in the chat with a link? Because sometimes if you include links in the comments, then the comment is no longer available. Only Smithsonian Education can add URLs to the chat. So I just want to kind of make sure that folks are aware of that, because right now I'm not 100% sure exactly what your question is. You said, sorry for spelling mistakes, Samuel Huntington, 1731 to 1796, President of Continental Congress. So we just want to make sure that we have some of the context for that question. So if you could type in your question, but without any URLs, I think that might do the trick. So thanks for that, and we'll stay tuned and stand by for your question. But in the meantime, I think a homepage tour might be just really useful for folks that are trying to wrap their heads around what's possible and what's available to them in the Learning Lab. Darren, would you like to kind of take the steering wheel?
Sure. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen there's some kind of quick navigation that's kind of walks through, I think, some of the things that the Learning Lab makes available to teachers and students and parents and caregivers and really anybody who's interested in accessing and using the digital resources from the Smithsonian. So if I click on the first one here, Discovery, the Smithsonian, the lab here really brings together all the digital resources from the Smithsonian. Now, the Smithsonian has a lot of stuff. If you've been to Washington, D.C. and the National Mall, we have a lot of buildings, and those buildings contain a lot of things. We have about 150 million objects in our collection across our 19 museums and research centers and libraries and archives. And quite a few of those have been digitized, and so that just means they've been photographed. Some digital information has been written about them. There's about 5 million of those objects have been digitized, and those are all discoverable here on the lab. And so we did a search earlier for those of you who are watching for Abraham Lincoln, and you can see, I'll go ahead and do the same search again to show what that looks like. So this is searching across not just one Smithsonian museum, but all the Smithsonian museums. It's searching for objects. You can see here's pocket watches, clothing. It's looking at photographs. It's looking at artwork. So it's looking for everything that pulls up Abraham Lincoln. So these are what we call resources on the Learning Lab. So these are the individual objects. We looked at one earlier. I'll open up Abraham Lincoln's watch. Ashley was kind of walking us through the earlier. You can zoom in and out of these objects. You can find out all the information that the museum knows about that object, that sort of information tab. We'll pull that up here. So over here is all the information that the museum knows about that object. You can look at multiple images if we have that. And there's a series of tools that she referenced here. You can favorite things to save them for later. You can share resources across social media channels, Google Classroom. You can add the resource to your own website. You can generate a citation for this object. So if you're using this in a class project or a paper you might be writing, Learning Lab will give you a suggested citation. We've got an easily printable format. So lots of ways to interact with this individual resource. The second thing that you find on Learning Lab search results here when you're in this kind of discovery stage that we're at now are Learning Lab collections. And so this is the second tab here. If I click on that, I'm going to find Learning Lab collections. And those are just aggregations that other Learning Lab users have created. And so those people might be Ashley or myself. They might be several of the other hundreds of educators who work across the Smithsonian. Or they might be classroom teachers or students or parents out there in the world. Anyone who has a Learning Lab account can create Learning Lab collections. And so looks like there's 29 collections right now. This number goes up every time I do a search for linking, because there's always new content out there. You can see here's one made by the Smithsonian Transcription Center. Oh, here's one made by Ashley. Here's one from the photography department at the National Museum of American History. Go into Ashley's. Oh, that's a... Just to give you a sense of what a collection is. So like I said, a collection is an aggregation of those resources, those individual building blocks. So you can see here, this is an aggregation that Ashley created of a whole film series. So each one of these individual resources here is a video resource, all pulled together and then described by Ashley. I don't know, Ashley, you should probably be describing this since it's your
No, you're doing great. Yeah, this is just one of the types of resources that are available in the Learning Lab. So there's a variety of multimedia. So we are not just seeing the kind of digitized images of portraits or paintings or specimen or artifacts, that sort of thing, but you're also hearing from Smithsonian experts. And so this is actually a film series that our office put together where you're learning about animal adaptations, and you can see some of those interesting insects from the National Museum of Natural History's Insect Zoo up there at the top. But then you can also, this is introducing a tarantula, for example. Kind of an interesting introduction to arthropods from one of our scientists. But the reason why Abraham Lincoln, for example, was included is because there's a section for verification. So if you look up in the second row, his pocket watch is there. Yep, right there. And then, so that's a great, very interesting mystery that the Smithsonian helped solve with some of our historians. Is there graffiti in Lincoln's watch? And so that's kind of an interesting thing to be able to kind of learn about and how historians actually do active history. And then the other image, and you can kind of watch as the curator explains his process. But then the other image is that video that you were just on, the Abraham Lincoln reading the craft plate portrait. So this is a very famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln taken right before his assassination. And it's just really interesting to hear the curator's perspective doing kind of a visual analysis of this portrait. When I think of all the museum resources that we have to offer, what I think is really unique is the questions we can ask of them. So for artworks or objects, we can really go deeply into them by thinking about what we see, taking in some observations, doing an analysis that then leads us to certain interpretations too. So just wanted to mention why this specific collection was included in Lincoln. It's also in the context of how Smithsonian experts can help you understand some of the objects too. So it's a great resource to be able to also follow. Darren, I also wanted to mention real quick, we have some comments in the chat, so I just wanted to point your attention to that direction.
Yeah, it looks like you've got some additional information from Thomas about what he's looking for. Actually, I'm going to go over and start searching. Do you want to kind of talk through the question here?
Sure, absolutely. So Thomas says he's looking for a portrait. Sorry, so you guys can see me. I'm going to stand up nice nice and tall, but he's looking for a portrait of Samuel Huntington by Charles Wilson Peale, 1783. So he's got the specifics, but all he saw was the 1780 side portrait. So can you bring the Peale, or can he bring the Peale portrait into his collection on the lab? And the answer is yes, of course you can. And so right now, thus far, have you been able to find any of the portraits thus far, Darren?
I think these are the side portrait that Thomas must be referring to.
Okay. Yeah, so
right, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like they are. What's nice about the Learning Lab is you're not limited to the 4 million resources that are available currently on the Smithsonian Learning Lab. So you can take those first 3 resources that Darren's found and you can put them into a collection. But if you have additional resources, either from trusted sources like the Library of Congress or the National Archives, you can also add those into your collection. And you can also add in additional websites too. So you can add in files or websites. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can add things that you've taken, so a photograph that you've taken, or things from other organizations. And I think Darren's going to be able to show you how to add resources that are outside of the Smithsonian's collection into your own collection.
Yeah, so Thomas, I'm guessing you're familiar. It looks like you said you've started some collections that are unpublished so far. So I think you're probably familiar with this screen. But for folks who might not be, this is sort of the green screen in the edit mode. I jumped in there a little too fast. I think I'll show you how I got there. So I just quickly created a new collection of that first image here, just so we can get started and show you what this looks like. So this is one of my collections. If you're just getting started in the lab, to get to the point where I am now, I'll kind of go back to that. You do need to create a free account. You can use that using your email or Facebook or Google. Once you create a free account, then you're ready to go to start creating collections. I'm going to jump back to that portrait. So this is the original portrait of Samuel Huntington. So when I'm logged in, so if you're new to this, you won't be able to do some things, but as soon as you create that free account, you'll have access to all these tools. I'm clicking on this first button here, which is the Add to Collection button. When I click on that, it's going to pull up the collections that I've made or create a collection. And I use that third tab here to create a collection, so I started a new one. I'm going to come over to my collection here and see if I can add it in. Maybe I'll just start over here again, just to a little quicker. So I'm giving my new collection a title. I could give it a description either now or later. And I'm going to click on Create Collection. So what this has done now is taken that individual resource and put it into a collection that's part of my work on the Learning Lab. And so as I come in here, with a little confirmation that that worked, and I'm going to click on that. And so here's that collection that I just made. And again, a collection is really just an aggregation of these resources. And so I've only aggregated one, but we're going to show you how you can do some more. So once you're in your collection, so again, this is when you're logged in and you've created a collection, I'm going to click on this green button here in the upper right-hand corner of the screen to go into edit mode. And this is how I can continue to build this collection. I can add new resources to it. I can add the kind of interactivity, some of the things that Ashley talked through that's covered really well in that Getting Started guide. But Thomas, to your question specifically, if you want to bring in those resources from other sources, you want to add websites, you're going to come into edit mode, click on Add Resource. So this is going to give you some options here across the top, these tabs here. The first one are your favorites, and those will come in here in a second. If you've already uploaded things, you can click on that second tab and you'll see a list of all the things that you've already added to the lab. I'm going to sort of jump over here to the right before we get to the one we're looking for. You can add a standalone feature. This is if you want to add some information in, if you want to build in some assessments or some interactivity, you can use those there. If you want to add additional Smithsonian resources, and you can search right from within this edit mode, and this actually allows you to add multiple things at once. So if you're still searching across the Smithsonian, you can add additional resources this way. But if you want to bring in either images or files or websites into your collection, this is the way to do it. This is that middle tab, Add a Resource. And so I'm going to see here. Wikipedia page. Let's see if we can see. Yeah, so if I want to kind of pull in some web content here, I'm going to open up the Wikipedia page for Samuel Huntington. Nope, wrong Samuel Huntington. We want 18th century Samuel Huntington. There we go. I think this is probably the guy we're looking for. There we go. I'm guessing that's the Peel portrait. But I'm going to grab the website address here from Wikipedia. We'll come back to the Learning Lab. And there are two options here when you're uploading a resource. You can upload a file. So if you, Thomas, if you have that Peel portrait from the Library of Congress, and I just saw your comment there, it's at the Library of Congress. You can actually download that image from the Library of Congress, their website, and then upload it into the Learning Lab. I'm pretty sure everything at the Library of Congress is public domain, but you definitely want to double check usage rights to make sure that you're okay to do that. But once you have that file on your computer, you can then upload it. I'm going to show you the website version here, and then maybe if we don't have any other questions, we'll show you the version of how to do that from the Library of Congress. But I'm going to click on this first thing here. I'm going to click on the second thing for their website. I'm going to paste in that Wikipedia entry, and then I'm going to just click on the add button in the upper right-hand corner. So Learning Lab is now added in that website. So when other people, or when you're looking at your own collection, you'll be able to click on that item and launch it out onto Wikipedia. Should we try to show the Library of Congress, Ashley? Should we jump into that?
Sure. I just wanted to remind folks, I added to the chat, I know people are kind of coming and going during the online office hours. So if you're new to online office hours, what's happening now is basically a kind of impromptu conversation between Darren, myself, and all of you. You can see and hear us. You can also see Darren's screen as he's navigating, so we can do some screen shares. And basically, if you have a question for us, you can, in the chat box, you can ask your question and we'll go in order, kind of queue up the questions. So right now you can see on the screen that Thomas is asking a question specifically about his collection of portraits of Samuel Huntington. He even says, thank you very much, with a thumbs up. So we're all getting kind of clued in on emojis too, as we start to embrace digital learning and distance learning. I think that's a new form of communication that we're all embracing as well. So with that, I just wanted to offer the ability to ask questions in the chat. We have just about 15 minutes left in our office hours, so we have plenty of time to answer any questions. Thus far, what we've done is gone through the distance learning page. So this is a new page that was just launched, and it was just announced by the Smithsonian Secretary, Lonnie G. Bunch III, on Twitter. And you'll see more and more resources being added to this page daily. Basically, this is an effort from not only Darren and myself, but the people that you don't see behind the scenes are hundreds of Smithsonian educators from across the museums that are offering both online resources as well as virtual opportunities to connect with their experts. So lots of great things going on that page as we speak. We've suggested to just bookmark it and keep refreshing so that you can see what's up to date and what's current, and we'll continue to do this for as long as it's needed. Speaking of as long as it's needed, if you have a specific question, query, outside of online office hours that you'd like to ask of the hundreds of museum educators that are ready and willing to support you, you can email learning@si.edu. And what that does, it basically generates an email that goes directly to Darren and myself. And we work to make sure that whatever your question is, we can kind of funnel those questions to the right people at the Smithsonian to make sure that you're getting responses as quickly as possible. So if you have a specific question, earlier today we had a question about how to help teach The Great Gatsby. And one of our educators from the American Art Museum just jumped in right away, and she had some great ideas on how to do so. So really helpful to be able to kind of connect with all of those educators. Hollis has a question too about refining search. So maybe Darren, you want to give that a try too?
The search she was referring to is when we did a Lincoln search. So let me jump back into that. It's always my old favorite. I'm not sure why. There we go, 1900 resources. Yeah, so like I was showing before, we have these two tabs, resources and collections, so kind of the individual objects, the building blocks, and then those aggregations. On both pages there, right above those tabs, there's a refine search link, and if you click on that, it's going to open up the search refine panel. And these are different for resources and collections, and we'll show you both here. But for resources, you can narrow down your search results, because you're right, Hollis. I mean, oftentimes, when you're searching amongst 5 million things, you're going to have probably more than you need unless you've got a really, really specific search. But this gives you a way to narrow things down a little bit. On the resource side, you can narrow by media types, or if you're looking for images or just audio files. There's digitized books and magazine articles and blog posts. We've got tens of thousands of videos. You can narrow down the type of thing you're looking for. We talked a little bit about open access earlier. If you're looking just for things with a CC0 license, things that are in the public domain, because you do want to download them and use them in creative ways outside of the lab, you can narrow your search results just to CC0. If you're looking for things that are currently on exhibit, perhaps maybe planning for not the near future, but hopefully not too far future out, maybe looking for things that you might want to see if you're planning on coming to Washington later this year, you can narrow your search results by that. Or if you're looking for resources from a specific department of the Smithsonian, specific museum that you might be familiar with, something maybe you saw when you were visiting the museum, you can narrow resources that way. When you come over to the other tab, to Learning Lab Collections, there's quite a few more ways to refine your search. So you can refine by subject. So these are the subject that the Learning Lab authors, the people who created these collections, have added them to. And there's a whole series of other ones down below, including age range, other educational features, such as who is it made for? Is this a student collection? Is it something made for parents? How long does it take? Is it a quick activity? Is it more of an extensive set of resources? If you're looking for things that have video content or specific other types of inclusions, you can do that as well. Or if you're looking at things that already have quizzes built in, you're looking for something that you can maybe repurpose as an assessment, you can refine those searches here. And those will continue to narrow down your search results to help you kind of get closer to that thing that you're looking for. So thanks for that question, Hollis. Oftentimes it's a bit of a skill to look amongst 5 million things, and I think Ashley and I we've gotten pretty good at it, but I think we still struggle sometimes too in sort of scoping how narrow or how broad to do a search result. So oftentimes with something like Lincoln, you might need to narrow it down to something like Abraham Lincoln and war, or something that gets you a little bit more specific, and narrow down to slightly less, 833 resources down from 1900. It gets you a little bit closer to that.
Absolutely. There's kind of an art to refining your search and thinking like a historian and how they might have described the artifacts or artworks or any of the objects that are available too. So a lot of times what I do is, or what I even suggest to students too, is to kind of start first, even just, a pencil and paper alongside, and create a mind map or a word web kind of what you're really looking for. So you probably don't want everything on Abraham Lincoln. And so Darren just gave a great example of perhaps including the words like Civil War, for example, or maybe you're thinking more specifically the Gettysburg Address. And so if you do that, then you can start to kind of hone in your search and do some of that work of kind of honing in what the Smithsonian has to offer to really meet what your needs are. I know a lot of times too, folks for search, sometimes we have folks that'll search for like history, and obviously we have lots of history. So what are you specifically referring to? And Hollis gives us a thumbs up too. So we are doing good on emojis.
Great.
Thanks, Hollis. Really appreciate it. Just to address too what Joan had mentioned in the chat, there aren't necessarily specific courses, but there are certainly online live web opportunities to connect with our experts. And so she found it right there in the tab for distance learning resources. If you go to the About section and then scroll down to distance learning, you will see all of those resources outlined there. And like I said, that list is growing over time. And so there's things that are specifically geared towards DC public schools. Pretty soon that will also be expanded to a national audience of teachers. So stay tuned for that. We also have things specifically for caregivers and for kind of the tweens and teens who could do some self-directed learning. There's things like games and interactives, ideas for how to conduct oral histories with your older relatives, for example. You could do it through a call like this, or even just a old school phone call, and how to document that and make it a learning opportunity as well. Lots of great interactives, especially in the science areas. There's activity sheets. There's different kind of hands-on experiments too. So there's a great one from the How Things Fly folks of learning about Bernoulli's principle and doing so with a simple sheet of paper. And so, that's just a great opportunity to kind of have supplementary resources that can both engage students, but then also for teachers who are looking for specific resources on what to share with their students while they're at home with their families. This is a great opportunity to access some of these. We'll continue to have online office hours throughout the week. So please do join us if you continue to have questions. The other thing is that right on that top of that page of distance learning, there is a email address, which is learning@si.edu. Please feel free, if you're having any trouble, if you're struggling to find the resources that you're looking for, shoot us an email. In addition to Darren and myself, there are truly hundreds of museum educators that are willing and ready to help you out in finding the right resources that you might need. So please do let us know what your needs are, and we will try to be as responsive as possible and continue to find a way to meet learners' needs in this kind of distance learning age. So just wanted to make sure that folks who joined us kind of later in the hour also knew some of those features as well.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I think just stay tuned to that distance learning page, because we'll continue to update the schedule for more of these events, these office hours. But I think we're going to have a really expanded menu of ways to digitally connect with our resources, but also with all the educators and all the other experts that work at the Smithsonian and who can't go to the museums right now, but are hungry to share their knowledge and share their work with teachers and caregivers and kids all across the country and all around the globe right now. So that page will really be updated quite a bit as we move forward in the rest of this week, but I think as the weeks come. So it'll be a great place to stay connected. I think we may have come to the end of our hour for office hours, Ashley.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate the questions that you asked throughout the hour. We hope that the distance learning page is especially relevant as you're starting to think about how to curate some digital resources depending on your context, whether it's, you're a teacher yourself or a curriculum director, district supervisor, that sort of thing, or if you're also kind of wearing multiple hats in the learning sphere right now and are also a caregiver. There's resources for caregivers specifically, as well as resources for independent learning. Maybe you have some middle schoolers or high schoolers in your life that you want to send those to. Please feel free to continue to send people to the learninglab.si.edu page/distance learning. That's where you'll find the latest information from across the 19 museums, 9 research centers, and the National Zoo. I did see a wonderful tweet today from a parent and their child, and they were watching, I think, naked mole rats from the National Zoo. They have a webcam there, and they were recording their observations in a notebook, and I just really appreciated that. It was kind of fun to see on Twitter. So please do share what you're doing. We are all in this together, and we are happy to support you in whatever ways that we can. So thank you very much for joining us today. The next office hours, Darren, those are Thursday, is that right, at 4 p.m.?
Thursday at 4 o'clock. Some of us might be there. I think Tess in our office will be leading that office hours this Thursday, but Ash and I may jump on too, but we'll be here to support you again live this Thursday, March 19th from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And until then, shoot us an email or check out our website, and we'll be here to support you. Thanks.
Absolutely. And thanks to Hollis for his comment, or their comment. Thank you for covering so much material during office hours. Really appreciate that comment.
Thank you for the good questions. Thanks, everyone.